Hello, it's Sarah from Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here with my week of reading wrap-up. This is where I talk about the books that I read this week, what I'm currently reading, and potentially could read next week, based on my mood. So I had a very good reading week. I completed a fair number of books of different sizes, different genres, different ratings. So let's get into it, and I'll kind of explain. So the first thing I finished, I was woefully behind in novellas in November. I did really great with nonfiction, but I didn't do so well with novellas. And I recognized that I needed to spend a little time there, or I was going to lose out on reading a lot of great books that I have. And ironically, the first one I picked up was not one that I had, but one that I went and got from the library, as I'm wont to do. And it's because I have developed this fascination with all things Virginia Woolf late in my reading career. And this book was something that I saw as I was browsing through the library stacks and getting a sense of what they had at my local library. And because I recognized the author's name, I thought, oh, well, that might be something fun and interesting. And this is Mitz, the Marmoset of Bloomsbury by Sigrid Nunez. Now, Sigrid Nunez wrote The Friend and won the 2018 National Book Award for a story of this woman who's dealing with grief and takes ownership of her friend's dog, her friend who passed away, their gigantic dog. So, she has a quirky sense, a little playful. She's playful, she's light. And so I knew to expect that going in, but this was really a little too strange for me. It felt like she really wanted to write something new about Virginia Woolf, and latched on to this idea of this marmoset, which is a very, very small monkey that the wolves actually did own and was one of their companions. Leonard is the one who brought this marmoset under their wing and named it Mitz, and proceeded to have Mitz through the rest of his life. And it was an interesting exercise. It was an interesting idea, but I think just ultimately it just felt like a vanity project and not. It didn't really have any weight to hold it. Now, if you are in love with marmosets, this might be a delight for you. If you like quirky, adjacent type of stories that pull these strange elements of historical people's past, this might be a great book for you. For me, I felt like it was just a little too thin, and just at the end of it, I thought, what was the point? And so I gave it a 2-star. So, but the good news is because it was a novella, I didn't waste a lot of time on it. I went from that straight into, you couldn't get more opposite of impact. This is Deborah Levy's Swallowing Geography, just this gorgeous little novella. This is put out by Penguin Essentials. And this is heady material. Experimental fiction, exploring boundaries and displacement and travel and people. And we follow this narrator who is in these relationships, and she's a writer, and she's traveling with her typewriter, and she's looking for a place to stay, and coming into contact with all of these people along the way. It's very interesting, very heady. In Deborah Levy's style, she does this thing where it's really disquieting. You're not always sure where you are in the story and what she's trying to say. And so you're along the ride with her, which is great for a story about travel and about displacement. So I think how she wrote it was interesting. I think the topic is interesting. I've picked out a few things that I thought had salient points, But overall, I didn't love the experience, but I respected it. And it's definitely something that if you're someone like me who's trying to read her full oeuvre, this is something to read. Yeah, I think this is one of her first novellas. So glad I read it. Would love to know from other people if you've read this and what your thoughts were. Did I miss something critical here that I probably should go back and take a look at? Again, tiny, itty bitty. So, I will admit it was disjointed reading experience to move immediately from Mitz, which was light whimsy, into super interesting, experimental, strange, disquieting type of fiction. But sometimes you have those reading experiences. What can you do? Then the saddest and best reading experience has completed, and that is reading Virginia Woolf's A Writer's Diary. So I'm not sure if you can see all of the tabs and all of the places that I marked. This one is just straight up fascinating. And reading, you wouldn't think that reading a memoir as a buddy read with someone would be interesting or provide a lot of material, but this was one of the richest reading experiences I've had, and I've had a good many. So I read this with Elizabeth of Bookish North, and there's so much to talk about, and she and I are both equally. I think she's read a little bit more than I have about Virginia Woolf, but for the most part, we're novices to her work. And so this has provided us insight into the time, into so many names that neither of us were intimately familiar with. We may have recognized a few, but not to the extent that we know now about who some of these people are and the connections that they have. And we read this out of a buddy read we did of Square Haunting, which was about a square, Macklembourg Square in London, where 5 women lived at different times, but they were all magnificent, interesting, compelling women, of which Virginia Woolf was one. And she and I were supposed to meet in London this year. And since we couldn't meet in London, we decided to read that together. And through reading that, we both recognized that we were fascinated with Virginia Woolf and wanted to read more. Both had this, so we decided to move into this. It was a magnificent reading experience through time. It was so poignant now because we were reading about Virginia Woolf as she's going into the war years and the trauma of having already survived World War I and seeing the encroachment of World War II. And I think that a lot of times when I read about this time, the English stiff upper lip, keep calm and carry on type of mentality frequently comes through. And she just doesn't fall into that. And it could be because she was a sensitive author and because this is her diary. So maybe what she was writing about in other places was different, but you really get a sense of the terror and the anxiety and the sadness of all of the death around you. She was also in the midst of finishing up a biography on one of her very good friends, Roger Fry. And I think being surrounded by intimate death of people surrounding her, she also was in her 50s, early 50s, and then also the looming war and being a pacifist herself and being vehemently anti-war. I think it took its toll, and the fact that she already had challenges with her mental health and had suffered from what quote unquote mental breakdowns at other parts in her life. And I think the stress really obviously got to her, and we don't get the entry of the day that she decided to walk into the river with stones in her dress, but we do get a very poignant ending that's very ordinary, very ordinary, magnificent. And I could tell that I will want to as I'm going to go through the project of reading Virginia Woolf, her oeuvre as well, I'm going to use this as reference so that I can see what she was thinking while she was writing those works. And yeah, so I'm incredibly excited about that. And thank you, Elizabeth, for being just the most patient and magnificent buddy reader, to allow us to take, in essence, 3 months to read what is a diary, but to take a year at a time and really think through what that year in experience was like for her. And there were many times when we felt like we could have told her something, like she talked about something and we're like, well, we could have told you that. We've seen the pattern. So it was quite amusing. Then I finished something entirely different. This was the audiobook that I mentioned last week, and this was The Evening and the Morning, and this was from Ken Follett. This is his prequel to the Kingsbridge series. It was absolutely satisfying for what it is, which is an audio historical fiction grounded in a place that I'm already familiar with, having read the other series, the Kingsbridge series. I really liked the characters that were here. You got the backstory of some of the characters. I think the time period was fascinating, and just if you like historical fiction and if you like audiobooks, and especially nice long audiobooks that you can kind of just sink into, and I have to say, I don't watch a lot of television, so I think this. For me, I think this offers the same feeling that people get about television series that go on for a good length, is that you get familiar with the characters, and it's comforting to return to something that is so familiar. I do like that in long audiobooks as well as series that I read. So yeah, it was good. It was good. I enjoyed it. Then next, one that I didn't enjoy so much and I was really looking forward to. This is The Coroner's Lunch by Colin Cotterill. And this is number 1 in the Dr. Siri Paiboun series. And I did this for Cloak and Dagger Mystery. And I was looking for, mysteries set around the world, mysteries in translation. And this was recommended to me by somebody that I've buddy read with, Judy. And although while I trust her judgment, this one didn't work for me. Sorry, Judy. The setting, magnificent, set in Laos. And it's post-war, still communist Laos. And the atmosphere is magnificent. So the author really got that sense of atmosphere. I thought the character was really interesting. We have a 70-year-old man who wants to retire, but is actually promoted to be the head coroner in the capital city, and it's because he's such a good surgeon, but he knows nothing about being a coroner, and he gets pulled into a mystery that he needs to solve. The characters around were interesting, and all of that. The mystery was interesting, but I could not get it out of my head. The niggling thing in the back of my head that made me uncomfortable, and that is that the main character was a Laotian and spoke about the character of the Laotian people. He also talked about the Vietnamese and Thailand because of what had happened during the war, and some things about how communism was still being controlled in one country and loosening in others. Very interesting, but knowing that a white Englishman who has lived there for many years, but still knowing that he was speaking through this Laotian character and making references to the Laotian people made me uncomfortable. It made me uncomfortable, and I don't have that point of reference to know if it's realistic or not. I'm not one who can tell, and so. My ignorance on that made me skeptical, and I couldn't get that out of my head. So when I read stories of expats who live in a place, I would much prefer that the point of view be an expat point of view in the narration, because it makes me more comfortable with those types of cultural conversations that are happening. Yeah, but this wasn't that. Now, this book was written in 2004, and I don't think we were as sophisticated about own voices and own voices perspective then as we are now. So I don't think I'll be continuing on with this series, unfortunately. Okay, but let's talk about what I'm currently reading. Still making my way through Proust with Leo of A Little Book Life. That's going great. I have returned to an unfinished project that I think I can get done before the end of the year. And I mentioned this in my end of the year project, or the end of the year book tag. That is the Mitfords, Letters Between Six Sisters, edited by Charlotte Mosley. And I'm actually flying through this. It's amazing what reading Proust, Virginia Woolf, Ducks Newbury Report has done to my reading. Whereas it took me a while before to get through this, I am flying through it now because the sentences are short. I can just knock it out, but still retain a lot of interesting things. What I find fascinating in this book is my preconceptions of who these characters were, because these women are so known in history for being the writer, the fascist, the Nazi, they called her the woman, just kind of like the grande dame, the country woman, and then the communist. So it's remarkable, these personalities of these women who in essence were not raised with any formal education. They were all taught on their own. They speak their own language. They have their own nicknames for each other and seemingly everyone in their environment. They were raised as upper class. Their father is a lord and mother is a lady. And there's, what is so interesting is the schisms in the family, specifically between Jessica, who was the communist, who actually I just saw in her letter, she lives not far from where I live. She lived within walking distance of where I live today, which is fascinating. So I'm going to take a walk by and see if the home she lived in is still there. There's schisms here, but there's also love, and there's also treachery. Nancy is much more devious than I ever expected. And we know things. And so each chapter, they break the chapter into like an era of time. And at the beginning, there'll be like an introduction into like an overview of what happened to the family, all of the like the intricacies of movement, of what was happening in the world, current events that were taking place that they were impacted by. And so you get this overview and then you go into the letters and you see exactly what they're choosing to say to each other in the letters. Fascinating. I am a little over, I would say I'm a third of the way through now, and I'm trying to read like a section, one of these chapters at a time, and absolutely blown away by it. So that's wonderful. I'm also continuing to read Memoirs of a Dutiful Daughter by Simone de Beauvoir. I haven't gotten that much further in there, so I need to kind of plot that out a little more. Also reading The Watchmaker of Filigree Street by Natasha Pullman. And I kind of felt like I needed something a little lighter and more whimsical than some of the things I've been reading. And so that's satisfying that need. And then lastly, I have an audio going for another one for a Cloak and Dagger mystery. And this is Mrs. Mohr Goes Missing by Maryla Szymiczkowa. And I'm enjoying this so much. It is set in Krakow in 1893, which is just a fascinating time. And I don't know much about Krakow in this time period at all. So I'm learning just a remarkable amount about the way that Krakow and Vienna were kind of in competition with each other, what was happening with the Jews, and how the thoughts about the Jews in Poland at this time in Krakow were starting to set the course for what ends up starting to happen coming into World War I and World War II. Everything is told through the eyes of Sophia. And Sophia is a really entertaining character. She is a wife of a professor, and she is a wannabe socialite. So there's little elements of Map and Lucia, little tingles of that I'm getting through this, where she's making mistakes and really trying very, very hard to be seen in a certain way so that she can grow in stature, and is very aware that her husband is a professor and as the wife and therefore has a certain status, and she expects to rise through the ranks because of that. She goes to a kind of a nursing home and realizes that she needs to do charity work to kind of be seen in society as one of the grand dames. So she sets up to do a raffle, and while she's there trying to convince some of the people there to join in, specifically the women who are in this home that have money, that are in the top echelon of this building. While she's there one day, there's all of this hullabaloo because one of the women is missing. And she has a curious mind, and so she starts to try to help find this woman. A few days later, she's found, but she has been killed and was hidden in the attic. And then she becomes very curious and wants to know a little more. So as she's trying to climb the ranks, she's also trying to investigate and see what's happening, and her nosiness is taking over. It is really entertaining. I'm about 20% through right now and really enjoying it very much. So that's what I'm currently reading. Then next week, who knows? I do have so many things that I want to finish before the end of the year, but I'm trying to be thoughtful about how much I add to my plate, not get too greedy. I do like to have a lot of books on the go. So that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, we are still in a global pandemic. It's getting worse than it's been in a very, very long time in many parts of the globe. Please remember to maintain safe social distance, wear your mask, wash your hands, and do not touch your face. That's it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to talking to you next week. Bye.